Welcome to Flock Talk, the podcast where we feature your favorite authors and narrators. Hosted by Craig Hart and Sarah Hannon. Visit us today at pinkflamingoproductions.com. And now, Flock Talk. Hello, all you happy flockers out there, and welcome to Flock Talk. My name is Craig Hart, and I'm here with my industrious co-host, Sarah Hannon. How are things going over your way, Sarah?
They're fine, although I have to take umbrage with your adjective today. I am not very...
Too much credit?
No, yes, way too much credit. I am way too distractible and not as industrious as I'd like to be. But you know what? I'm going to just take it as like a mantle of honor and and I'll just strive to fulfill today's introduction.
Okay, well, we'll just, if nothing else, we'll say persistent.
Okay, yeah.
So you still
persistent.
get things done, eventually. However, we do have a persistent and industrious guest with us. Want to hit us off with a bio?
Absolutely. Author Coralie Moss writes stories about magical beings on inadvertent quests to find their true selves. Along the way, they encounter friends and foes and interesting situations. Sometimes things get a little stabby or steamy, or stabby and steamy. She lives on a magic-filled island off the coast of British Columbia. Thanks for coming, Coralie.
Oh, it's wonderful to be here with you, Sarah and Craig. Thank you so much for the invitation.
Oh, it's our pleasure. I'd like to hear a little bit more about this magical island. Is there room for, one more person asking for a friend who is me?
Well, first, I might have to sponsor you into Canada.
Oh, fair.
Yes, there's plenty of room. It's Salt Spring Island. And from some of my windows, I can see into Washington State, and across the channel, I can see into Vancouver. Oh. And it is one of these places with mountains and oceans and provincial parks and three wineries.
It does sound magical.
3 wineries, 1 brewery, and a distillery.
Wow. I can see where their island priorities are.
Yeah, and there are a lot of other writers and authors tucked onto this island, and I think we all appreciate kind of the beauty and the solitude.
Speaking of writing, I want to talk a little bit about your path to becoming an author. Was writing something you always wanted to do, or did it come up a little later for you?
I wrote my first book of poetry when I was 11, I think, and then promptly stopped writing poetry. It wasn't like, seriously, I was going to be an artist. So I started painting when I was a kid. I went to a high school for the arts. I went to a school for design. I was going to be a starving artist in New York City. That was like my vision for my life. I had the loft all furnished, like in my mind. But my path diverged, and it was only around 2015, actually, that I started to write seriously. We were living in Mexico, and I had been blogging for years about my adventures as traveling, and especially in Mexico, and taking a lot of photographs and just, thinking heavy life thoughts kind of thing. And someone was reading my blog and they said, "Have you ever tried to write a novel?" And I was like, "No, never tried to do that." But literally, I have ADHD, and my brain literally went from going, "Oh, here's an 800-word blog post," to 50,000, 60,000. Let's try it. And 2 months later, I had the first draft of my first novel, which will never see the day of light unless maybe I use it as a fundraiser sometime. But it showed me that I could get from point A to point B. And so I wrote a couple of romance novels. We moved to Canada, and then I started writing fantasy because I read so much fantasy. I love fantasy novels. And it literally took off. So we moved to Canada. We moved to this magical place. Within a year, I was writing fantasy novels. So I guess I've been writing solidly this is my 6th year of writing, and self-published for a little over 4 years.
Yeah, well, you did end up pursuing the life of an artist, just in a different way.
Yeah.
It was funny when you mentioned about becoming a starving artist in New York City. When I was younger, I always thought that would be very romantic. I had this it's kind of the same images. And it's interesting as one ages, the appeal of suffering for one's art becomes strikingly less appealing. At least I
I,
have found.
I have to agree. And now I think my parameters are more, especially now that, COVID restrictions are lifted and I've been able to do a little more traveling back to the US to see family. I've come to realize that, like the starving part isn't intrinsic to my creativity, but
Yeah.
solitude is.
Yeah.
Like that's the thing I've come to understand is I actually need a space to write, and I need that kind of cushion of space around time-wise in order to write. So I didn't understand that when I was like thinking about being a starving artist.
You need a
But
space to write. It doesn't necessarily have to be a drafty attic, however.
yeah,
Lit
exactly.
only by
And
candles.
if it has a comfortable chair and things are more ergonomic, that is really good.
Exactly.
Do you still do any of the painting or any other
I
art?
do. I started dabbling in visual art again this year because the book I'm writing right now and the series that will come from that first novel is going to have illustrations in it that are going to become oracle cards. So eventually creating an oracle card deck, because there is magic and goddesses and all that in this book. And so I'm just starting with some line drawings. And my youngest son is doing the maps for me. I've always wanted to put maps into my books, but because of the nature of my brain, if I start to research how to do maps, I will become a map maker.
Right.
So I needed to find somebody who could do maps with me. And so he's taking on that project. So I'm very excited because this book is the first one that will have things like maps and images on the inside of it.
I also enjoy reading fantasy, although sometimes I find it daunting. And like I learned later in life that it's not scary to have a map. If the book had a map and a glossary, I was like, I can't do it. I can't do it. I have to remember all that. I have to I turn back to the map and be like, where did they go?
Oh, but Sarah, you just gave me a great idea, because I could put sections of the map, like break the map into sections and put them into the relevant map section into that part of the book.
Ooh, that's a good idea for people like me who
Note
are
to
like
child.
We're just sitting here being muses for Coralie. This is
Hey,
great.
this is
Right.
good. Well, I belong to a writing group, and we are on Zoom most mornings, or have the option of being on Zoom most mornings with each other. And it's in the check-ins, in those discussions, where oftentimes so much will fire, like firing off each other kind of thing. So yeah, conversations amongst creatives are good.
Well, what is it about, do you think, magic and fantasy that fascinates you?
That's a great question, Craig, and I can pinpoint it to my childhood when I used to meander through the woods of Acton and Maynard, Massachusetts, because we were also close to the Maynard border. And even though we lived in a development, we had our house backed into like acres and acres and acres of woods. And as a little kid, I would go exploring, and I never had any fear. And I would literally get down onto the ground and look at moss, and I would make like little fairy houses. And I didn't have Barbies, I had trolls, so I would make houses and like whole encampments for my trolls.
The
in
little
woods.
dolls
And
that
some
are
of them
naked with the hair.
yeah, with
Those
all the hair. And so those, for me, being in nature is a magical experience, and being in one's imagination is a magical experience. And because I've always been involved in the arts, like literally from a kid, I played an instrument, always done visual art. I did write poetry once. I feel like I'm in touch with that thread to magic at all times. And fantasy became, it's easier for me to enter into a fantasy world than it is like a contemporary world, even though my fantasies are all set in contemporary times. So there's often a mixture of, non-magical humans, but very magical beings and creatures and humans.
Do you have themes that recur from like book to book?
I think I do, and I think it's in there in the bio piece, that you read.
Oh, the stabby?
Yeah, well, I think I'm getting better at stabby. I'm getting less afraid of killing characters, stabbing characters, letting characters bleed, letting characters get emotionally hurt. I think I was afraid of that at first. Recurrent theme would be characters coming into their true selves. Mm-hmm. And when I started writing, in my romances, I started with older heroines, because I think there's something that happens to humans if they have children, as their children start to leave the house, our roles begin to change. And we have like some space to think about, well, now that I'm not so much in that caregiver role, what would I like to do? So I kind of took that question and have given that question to my characters, but not in such a direct way. That if there is, usually there's a major event in their lives that causes them to question their reality and question what they've been told or what they've grown up with. And that then sets them on a journey that brings them into like a fuller realization of who they are or what their powers are and what they can do with those powers. And are they going to do good things with those powers? Are they going to do not so good things with those powers? So I think that's a theme. And I really like that question. I really like that premise. And I love it when I'm a pantser, not a plotter. So I love it when a character just kind of shows up in a dream or just as I'm noodling about on my laptop, and I start to get to know them, and I start to get to see, ooh, this is where we're going to go, or this is where I'm going to take you. Oftentimes, though, it's also where they're going to lead me.
That's cool. I was just going to say for, people who aren't me, obviously. Can you tell me the difference between a pantser and a plotter? What does that mean?
Oh, sure. So a plotter is a writer who makes a structure for their book. And so they have Act 1, Act 2, Act 3, let's say. There are a number of really good books out there all about plotting and structure. And so these are people who do like character worksheets, and they know kind of what their character's going to go through. They know the character's art, their villains. They know what's going to happen at the end. Somebody who's a pantser literally goes by the seat of their pants. Where the writing process itself, like for me, it's an alchemical kind of thing. I am in that writing space, and stuff comes to me in the moment. Yes, it requires a lot of editing. And then some writers are also kind of a combination. They're plantsers or quilters, where they're quilting or stitching together at least something of an outline and leaving room for lots of spontaneity.
So what was it like taking your Dragon series to audiobook?
It was so special. My publishing company is called Pink Moon Books. So we have Pink, in common, Pink Flamingo Productions. And a writer who was in my writing group, Katie Robert, had recommended Pink Flamingo. So I started looking at it, and I started listening to the different narrators' voices, and decided, okay, I'm gonna do this. And because I really loved that series, and it was also my first series with from a male point of view. So I was really hoping I could find a performer, a narrator, to kind of match my vision of my hero, Jake the Dragon Shifter. And I did.
What is a piece of advice you would give to someone just starting out?
I'm going to borrow from Nike and go, just do it. That it's truly, you can start with 5 minutes a day, and to imagine that there's a you're going to find a method, a way to do it that works for you, I do a combination of working on my MacBook and also journaling. So there are just some times when I have to physically write those words, and to look at blockages as just things you have to be like the water and flow around the blocks. Like you will find a way. If you want to write, you can do it. You will find a way to do it.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, that wraps up the main questions we have, but we do have a special bonus section that we like to call Hot Six. Are you ready for this?
Let me have a sip of water. Okay, Hot Six. I'm ready.
Buckle up, listeners. It's time for Hot Six.
Question 1. What is the most overrated book you've ever read?
Many years ago, there was this book called Lovely Bones, or The Lovely Bones, I forget, and I tried to read it, and it traumatized me. So I put it down. My sister loved it, but she also didn't have any kids at that time. So I remember and that book, that didn't come with any content notes or content warnings. So that was a tough one.
All right, question 2. What famous literary work have you never read, but you feel like you should have?
Oh, Pioneers by Willa Cather is supposed to be a classic of American literature. And I've never read it. And before one of my grandmothers died, she was giving me the family history. And it turns out I'm related to Willa Cather. So I feel, because she was like, oh, and then my mom's cousin Willa would do this. And I would like, Willa who? And she's like, oh, Willa Cather, the one who wrote the books. And I'm like, oh my gosh. So somewhere in my stack of Post-it notes is the Post-it note that says, please order Oh Pioneers, and just read it. So maybe this summer, thanks to you all, I will finally read Oh Pioneers.
All right, question 3. If you could be any animal for one day, what would you be?
Oh, I would be a big cat. I would be a panther on stealthy feet.
Is it my turn? Yes. Number 4. What is your biggest pet peeve, grammatically speaking?
Double spaces between sentences. They make me want to stab my eyeballs out.
I am so guilty because that's how I learned.
I didn't notice any on the emails, though. Hold on, I could check my
No,
email.
don't! I can't. I'm glad you didn't be like, I can't do this. I can't go on with you. No, we learned, because when I learned keyboarding in school, we, that's what we learned. You space. But now when I space, it often just puts a period in for me, or it just deletes it. It's just autocorrect. Yeah.
I think that's a holdover from the typewriter days, the double space. Because all characters were evenly spaced on the typewriter, and now you've got different kernings. Question 5. Looking back over your entire lifetime, what is your most embarrassing favorite song?
Embarrassing favorites? Volare. Oh, sorry, I won't. I can't sing. My throat's really clogged. I will not sing it. I was singing that as a lullaby. I used to sing that to my children as a lullaby. So I have an embarrassing moment that came out of that song. My darling little tow-headed son pressed his fingers to my lips and said, Mom, please stop singing. Don't ever sing. You can't sing. Just stop.
Oh, no.
Kids.
Kids.
They don't hold back.
So I guess it wasn't so much the song as it was the songstress.
Okay, you're going to hate this question.
Oh, great.
What is one...
I'm sorry. I have to go.
What is one thing you wish you could uninvent? It doesn't exist anymore.
Okay, that one's easy. Jet skis. I've lived on the ocean or by the ocean most of my life, and those things are so bloody loud, even if you live very far away or way up the mountain like we do now from the harbor. They make a lot of noise, and they kind of terrorize the wildlife. So yeah, I could do without jet skis.
Sounds good. Coralie, thank you so much for joining us on Flock Talk. Really appreciate your time. This was great.
Craig, thank you. Sarah, thank you. I so enjoyed this, and I look forward to listening to more of the Flock Talk interviews.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank
Pleasure to
you
have
so
you.
much. Have a good
Great.
day.
Thank you so much.
You've been listening to Flock Talk, the podcast where we feature your favorite authors and narrators. Hosted by Craig Hart and Sarah Hannon. This podcast is produced by Pink Flamingo Productions. Editing by Craig Hart. Visit us today at pinkflamingoproductions.com.